Hello parents, whether you're already one of our parents who has a child in Studio 5 or you're going to be a new parent joining us in the new school year at secondary. My name is Simon Scoons and I'm the Middle Years Programme Coordinator, or MYP for short. Now, under normal circumstances I would have done a presentation in our theatre, but under the circumstances that's not actually possible at the moment. So instead, I'm going to make a video for you, which is essentially the same information, to really give you an idea of how students learn in the MYP and especially grade 6. This presentation is for all of you parents, whether you are already part of the Studio 5 student body or from another school and joining us in grade 6 in the secondary school at the beginning of the next school year. It's an introduction to the so-called Middle Years Programme, or the MYP, the middle programme between the PYP, primary school, and the IB diploma in the last 2 years. The first and most important thing to say, to use a cliche, same but different. There are many common threads that go through all three programmes, and this is certainly true from the PYP into the MYP. Many of you will be familiar with this graphic which summarises the primary years programme, and you may not be so familiar with the middle years programme, but you can see straight away that there are commonalities between the two, particularly things like approaches to learning, which I will do a little bit on in a minute, and the importance of concepts. There's also international mindedness, which binds all IB programs. So I'm going to go into a little bit more detail now about the MYP. First of all, just like primary school, inquiry is central to the way students learn in the MYP. Not all answers come from teachers like myself. In fact, it's a world of discovery, and how students learn is a process of practice, sharing, collaborating, thinking again, learning from disappointments, and really teaching students the art of learning independently, as well as, of course, teacher instruction at the same time. Concepts. Now, in the PYP, concepts, these big ideas, bind the programme together, and the same is true of the MYP. Every unit that we teach and the students learn has a key concept, and these are the 16 different ones that actually embrace all the different subject areas. So students begin to learn not so much loads and loads of content, but they use these big ideas to make connections across subject areas and across years, because the MYP, of course, is a 5-year programme. Again, a strong similarity, although with a different name. In the PYP, they call them transdisciplinary themes. The MYP's global contexts essentially do the same thing, and that is they actually add a real-life element to every unit. So every unit, whether it's more based on a maths unit or a language unit or a science unit, it doesn't matter. Each one will have one of these binding it together to make it relevant to students today. Perhaps the most important, certainly from my point of view, are these so-called approaches to learning. Now, I've described this in previous presentations essentially as the kind of learning muscles that bind students learning together, but also they are lifelong learning skills. Every single curriculum has some form of these, but they are very much in the forefront of the MYP. So they come under those 5 headings, and as you can see, some of them are more academic in nature, the cognitive ones, critical thinking, creative thinking, and so on, types of research and communication, very important, but it also affects the non-cognitive aspects of learning, such as how kids collaborate, and also affective skills, things like how do they bounce back from disappointments, how do they learn to be resilient. And certainly during the period of online learning, organisational skills and reflective skills really came to the fore. and we certainly noticed that in grade 6 students as well as all other secondary students. Now, from a teacher's perspective, we've got a challenge here because we do have 3 programs at ISHCMC, and our challenge is really to make sure that the transition from the end of Studio 5 into the MYP is not one which is non-aligned. We've got to think also about how students end their schooling, which is in the 2 years of the IB diploma and graduation. Myself, I also teach the IB diploma as well as teach in the MYP program. So planning backwards is important as well as forwards. Yes, it's a challenge. With that in mind, grade 6 teachers in particular have really thought about how to take on how students learn in Studio 5 and also knowing what's coming next and tying these two together. So they came up with key priorities. We do have learning outcomes per subject for every subject and for the end of each year. That is something that I'll revisit with maths and English shortly. There is also thinking beyond grades, into grade 7 and beyond. A flexible timetable when we need it. So there are times when the classroom walls in effect are broken down and students embark on something more interdisciplinary, more open. We also recognise that ATL skills have to be there and really taught throughout every single unit in every subject. There is always choice. We don't just tell students what they're going to learn. There is choice in order for them to develop their own skills and interests. And we have projects, which again, it depends on the units at the time, and it may depend on the actual year group, but we'll have opportunities for project-based learning, as well as team teaching across different subjects. So rather like primary school, that's what they're used to. Grade 6 kind of carries on that model, but in a more of a hybrid format. What else have we got? We've got a core of advisory teachers who grade 6 students will meet every day to keep an eye on the bigger picture of their learning. And again, I will revisit this shortly, we do have specified learning areas for grade 6 students. Again, that will be familiar to grade 5, Studio 5 students at primary. On to the important bit, I suppose, for many of you, what subjects are there? Now, there are 8 different subject areas, and some of the names of these may be different from curriculum that you have learned or you're used to. So language and literature, this is really your mother tongue language, English being the main one here, but we also offer Korean and Vietnamese language and literature. Language acquisition, more world languages, not your first language, but you may be learning it for the first time. Individuals and societies, it's called social studies at the PYP end. It's also sometimes called humanities, so it mixes economics and business and geography and history. Sciences, maths, arts is music, art and drama. Perhaps the brand new subject area compared to many primary schools is design, and even that divides up into types of design, a very creative subject, product design, and there's a combined course whereby they learn digital design as well. Again, it's a relatively different option for other curriculum, but a very important one. And all these 8, I should say, have equal weight. Each one has its own knowledge base. It uses concepts, as mentioned before, and the skills, the ATLs, that also I've mentioned already. Now, interdisciplinary learning is the usual mode of operandi in the primary school. We do also do that in secondary, particularly in grade 6, where English and individuals and societies, social studies, is combined into one subject area, which is, we just nicknamed it NSOC. So this is much like they do in Studio 5. And it may go beyond that, just these 2 subject areas at particular points where there may be interdisciplinary learning combined with, say, science or design, as I just mentioned. Language choices. Now, shortly, if not already, you will receive a letter which is written by myself asking you to make a choice of language for your child in grade 6. Within the letter is a Google form link, and I would very much like you to respond to it as soon as you can. You may get it from various channels. It's the same letter. You can actually change your choices, but the sooner we know, the better, of course, in order to create classes in advance of the next school year. So running through how they work. First of all, every student in grade 6 learns English. Some language and literature, those whose language levels in English is already at a competent level, or language acquisition, which doesn't involve literature, which is more focusing on getting the language right. On top of that, if we think it's right and we have the facilities for this, is to offer EAL support, English as an additional language. So that's on top of the English course that they will be doing. Vietnamese and Korean students also take language and literature in their own languages. Now, for Vietnamese students, that is a government law. They basically have to do it. Korean students, most do. I mean, very, very few don't, put it that way. All other students can choose either French, Mandarin or Spanish as language acquisition. So that assumes it's not your mother tongue. There is another option, that if your child, you think they should be learning the mother tongue instead, which is not one of the languages, Vietnamese, Korean or English, that is possible, and we can support you in finding a tutor, and we can also provide a venue on campus. That would come at your own extra cost because it's obviously bringing in a tutor from outside. So those are the options, and I've laid those out in a little bit more detail in the letter. We can advise you if necessary, if you're thinking which one to choose. But the important thing really is to think, where does the skill set lie? Where does the interest lie for the foreign language, the language acquisition course? And we do recommend that students who, say, start doing French language acquisition in grade 6, they stick with it for 5 years. So they actually reach a level of competence by the time they reach the diploma years, the last 2 years. Going back a bit, learning outcomes. Now, these are important to us because we need to set benchmarks from one year to the next. So just to give you an idea, this is just 2 subject areas which every student will do. What do we actually require? Now, obviously, it depends on their command of English, but these are our benchmarks, our standards for the end of grade 6. And they involve speaking and reading and writing. Now, of course, you can pause the video and read more about those. I just thought I would pause for you so you can see. There's quite a lot there, but we all believe that these are important skill-based standards that all students by the end of grade 6 should be able to be competent in. The same for maths. Again, we have students who come in with a much higher level of sophistication and ability, and others who don't. But again, the expected learning outcomes are necessary in order for us to think ahead where they're going from grade 6 and forward. So here are the for the end of grade 6 maths learning outcomes. And I may say these are set by the IB. They have slightly different words for our school, but they are worldwide standards for the MYP at this level. Now, what does a school day look like in grade 6? Myself and other colleagues are in the process of talking to students in Studio 5 at the moment, and actually right now we're changing the shape of the school day for next year. So I'm going to not give you the detail because I'm not quite sure what it is, but I know it won't change radically from what we have now, which involves there will be 4 lessons every day. Students will go from one subject to the next. There is also, importantly, mindfulness, which the primary school practice as well. We have it after lunch in secondary, and that will take place at the beginning of every period 3 in each day. We have advisory every day as well, when your son or daughter has a chance to touch base with their advisory teacher, plan ahead, reflect on what's happened, and other things that happen which are advisory led, including the likes of assemblies and what have you. Students do move from classroom to classroom, and I guess this is a little bit different. We are a big secondary school, but we still have most of the classes concentrated in certain areas, so it depends on what the particular subject requirements are. So it may be going to a science lab, for instance, or to a design studio, or the art rooms. A lot of the other classes tend to be in the same area. Okay, next, an important part of the MYP, and the whole of the IB in fact, is service as action. We strongly believe as an IB program school that learning that happens in lessons shouldn't be seen in isolation. It should lead to actually doing something. There'll be lots of opportunities where service learning, as it is called in education these days, takes place. It may be born out of a particular unit, but equally it could be joining a particular group which we have well established in this school already. This gives a great opportunity for grade 6 students to interact with older students. And over the course of the MYP, they gain credits in these in order for them to complete the MYP at the end of grade 10 at a certain level of doing things above and beyond what they do in classes. I've also mentioned here ASAs, after school activities, for those who are not used to this particular acronym. These, while there's lots of sporting activities and so on, I won't go into detail about those now because you will discover those in August, and then there will be lots of opportunities for sign up for your son or daughter. I mentioned this twice already, I know, but we are spoilt in having a very new campus with lots of different learning spaces. You can see at the top, this is a design studio area. We've got these classrooms which have removable walls. You can see there's the wall collapsed there. So we can double up, we can do lots of simulations, kids can join, and then we can do team teaching. Our corridors are more than a corridor, they're also a learning space for a variety of things. This just gives lots of opportunities for students to learn in different ways. And we also have a marvellous media centre, the Library Plus, which is a wonderful space for students and in a quieter way to do their learning there. I mention this because some believe that, we can just leave grade 6 students to get on and learn for themselves, but there really is a strong case for remembering that structure is vital. So having that structure of the school day, having an advisory teacher who is their anchor person is really important in order for their creativity to flourish. But you may well ask, because usually parents do, what about homework? Well, we like to call it extended learning because every student will have a different amount of inquiry that they do depending on their level of ability and interest. But we still have extended learning, homework, but it's purposeful. I think that's the key word here. We don't just have it for the sake of it. Inquiries are led by the students and guided by teachers. And it may be they have to do some different things at home, but there may be many different so-called homeworks going on in the same evening. Some subjects do require more kind of practice. I think particularly, as I've written here, language, grammar, algebra, just practice at home, sort of shorter tasks, and that may be more teacher-directed. So I'm saying it's important, but it doesn't take over your son or daughter's life. Another important thing which parents often ask is about technology. Now, this wouldn't happen at ISHCMC, I'm just telling you. But we do obviously believe that IT does add value to learning. At the same time, we also recognise that using a pen is actually very, very useful and important, because actually writing is a much better way often in getting students to process things in their brain rather than copying and pasting and typing away. So yes, we have IT. All students have a laptop, which they're issued at the beginning of the school year, and they will use it quite a lot, obviously, but not all the time. Another question that parents always ask is about assessment. So this is a really short guide to assessment for you. In the MYP, we do rely on feedback. You'll see it's here, feedback, feedback, feedback. Feedback is the main messages that we give to students as to think about how they can improve. And teachers will set so-called formative assessments, which are really a practice. And with the feedback, the idea is that the students actually read the feedback and learn from their mistakes, see for areas of improvement, before a summative, which does lead to grades, and I'll explain that a little bit more in a minute. It's more of a formal judgment. But again, feedback is important. We don't give grades at all until the second semester in grade 6, simply because we want students and parents, frankly, to be used to the form of assessment that we do in the MYP. And this is actually what most schools who are doing the MYP do these days. So it's not all focused on numbers. And assessments can come in many formats. You may think your son or daughter is going to get a test every day. Well, they're not. There are lots of different, more creative ways of assessing the performance, the achievement levels of a kid at any particular time. And there's a few examples for you. So this is how it actually works. Each subject area, and there are 8, as I said before, has 4 different assessment criteria. So they're looking at different aspects of learning within that subject area. At different times, teachers will set an assessment which may use 1, it may use 2, it may use all 4 at the same time. But it's much more refined, certainly from the way when I was at school, when it was, oh, this is an A, this is a C+, or whatever. It's looking at very specific types of learning within the subject. Now, by the end of the year, each student is assessed at least twice on each of these criteria. So you've got 4 in each subject, so there'll be 8 at least. Therefore, at the end of the year, we put all this together and we make a judgment based on best fit. It's not an average. So it really is a cumulative way of looking at assessment, which allows students to improve. It means that any, say, bad grade does not mean anything on its own. It's really an opportunity to go, oh, well, let's see what we can do next time, having read and absorbed the feedback and talked to the teachers. We use rubrics. If you're from the States, you may be familiar with these, and I know other parts of the world less so. So really the important thing is not these numbers on the side, because everything's out of 8. So we're talking about that's the top end, and we've given some verbs here for you to see what they mean. These are the important things, which are the actual descriptors, and we use these command terms also to show different levels of achievement. Again, you can look at that. This is just one example of one assessment in one subject, but we use these in every assessment. Coming to the end now, sector is our big important place, and all of you, hopefully, if you haven't learnt sector yet because you're new, this is our place where we join together. The teachers have one part, the students have another, and you have your own part of sector called Sector Engage. So everything goes on to sector, the feedback goes there, you can read the feedback there, you can talk to your child about what the teachers are saying. It also is a place for our 2 reports. We have so-called Learning Update, which happens in October, which has a little bit, no grades, ATL skill judgments. You know, how well are they doing with those important skills? And a comment from the advisor. In the other reports, the evaluations of learning, they come in January and June, and they give more ATL judgments, but also grades for the 4 criteria for each subject. But as I say, we don't really start the grading part until semester 2 in grade 6, because we'd like students and parents to get used to the language of assessment before we do that. Finally, coming to who to contact and for what particular concern or question that you may have. Now, we have a counselling team here who are there always for the personal, social, emotional issues. We also got, obviously, teachers, specific subject teachers are the first ones to go to for any academic concerns. We have learning support. Jasmine is our leader of the learning support team, and she would be one if you have any issues, including things to do with EAL. And finally, yes, Mr. Ramon Onelas is our Activities and Athletics Director. Now, you may see that in this screen we've also got the second point of contact. Always the advisory teacher is the anchor person for your son or daughter when you arrive in grade 6. And then there's the grade level leader, Mr. Kevin Mount, and myself, and Jo Smith, if you've seen the video for students. She features there as the assistant principal for grade 6 as well as 7 and 8. And finally, if you have any questions about your son and daughter's language choice, please contact Janice Smith. She's the one in charge of this. Better you contact her and she will help you with any of your questions. Thank you very much.